Hello everyone, welcome to the Tim Booker channel. Wishing you all an enjoyable listening experience. Today, I'll be interpreting a book called The Elegant Pitch. The author of this book, Mike Figliuolo, is a renowned American public speaker and trainer. He has worked for many years in management consulting at the world-famous information company, McKinsey. In this book, he introduces a minimalist approach to work known as structured thinking. This thinking method can simplify your work and enhance communication effectiveness. It enables you to present perfect solutions to your boss in less time than others. So, what is structured thinking? Structured thinking is a reverse thinking method that starts with the conclusion. This approach is similar to conducting a scientific experiment. You begin by conducting a series of investigations, hypothesize potential outcomes, collect data, and determine whether your hypothesis is proven or disproven. Finally, you document the results in an experiment report. You may wonder, what does unstructured thinking look like? Unstructured thinking starts with data. In the workplace, when a leader presents a problem and asks for your recommendations, most people tend to gather a large amount of data, conduct detailed analyses, and then sift through the useful parts. Ultimately, they integrate their findings and analysis into a document, hoping to impress the leader with their diligence and rigor. However, this traditional thinking pattern, which derives conclusions from data, may seem well-founded but has two major flaws. The first flaw is that it leads to a lot of unnecessary analysis. To arrive at the best recommendations, you need to analyze vast amounts of data, explore various possible ideas, and then filter them. In reality, much of the time is wasted on ideas that are ultimately discarded. The second flaw of the traditional thinking approach is that it is not conducive to effective communication. When you hand a thick report to a leader, they are likely to skim through it quickly and set it aside, asking you to explain it briefly. In the workplace, higher-ranking individuals often have limited time for detailed explanations. They want the final answer rather than knowing how much effort you put into arriving at that answer. Structured thinking can overcome both of these flaws perfectly. Structured thinking starts with the answer, considering the conclusion first and then working to prove or disprove it. On one hand, it guides you to filter useful information from the start, avoiding wasting time on irrelevant information. On the other hand, this method constantly revolves around the interests of the decision-maker, designing logic from their perspective. As a result, your communication becomes more efficient, and your recommendations are more likely to be accepted. Like a collaborative experiment, the process of structured thinking has precise steps and sequences. The entire process can be simplified into 4 major steps. The first step is to propose recommendations, based on the problem to be solved, and present a reasonable and valuable hypothesis. The second step is to establish the structure, creating the logic for analysis and narration. The third step is to analyze and adjust, using analysis to validate or reject the hypothesis. Finally, the fourth step is to integrate and output, sharing your ideas with stakeholders. Now let's dive into the details of how to apply structured thinking following the 4 major steps. First, let's take a closer look at the first step, proposing recommendations. Imagine your boss asks, "Can you provide me with the best way to increase profits by $1 million? What would you do? You might already have a few strategies in mind, such as developing a new product, entering a new market, raising prices, or downsizing, among others. These ideas are good, but if you start proposing hypotheses right away, you've already missed the mark. You see, all problems don't just arise out of nowhere, there's always a reason behind them. If you can't figure out why the problem needs solving, it's challenging to offer the recommendations the other party truly desires. If you dig a bit deeper, you might discover that the current sales quarter ends in 3 weeks, and profits are far below the target. This is the actual reason your boss wants to increase profits. So, the immediate problem you're faced with is how to boost profits within a short time frame. Ideas like introducing new products or entering new markets can be ruled out. In this 3-week window, it might be more suitable to increase prices across the board or postpone marketing activities until the next quarter. Therefore, instead of rushing to propose ideas, start by defining the problem clearly. Apart from understanding the problem's requirements, it's crucial to uncover the why behind the problem. Only by understanding the true need can you ensure your efforts are heading in the right direction. Once you've defined the problem, you'll likely generate more than one idea. Here comes the challenging part: when faced with a list of ideas, you need to make a difficult decision, selecting one as the initial hypothesis. Initially, this might feel uncomfortable and even doubtful because it breaks the old habit of analyzing before deciding. However, structured thinking isn't a one-way street, it's a continuous process of iteration. In other words, you don't have to find the optimal solution right away. If you discover issues with your initial hypothesis along the way, you can change it promptly. Choosing the initial hypothesis is just the first step towards reaching the final answer. To make a more rational decision, ask yourself a few questions. 1. Which idea is likely to yield better results? 2. Which idea aligns with our needs? 3. Which idea is more likely to gain support from stakeholders? 4. Which idea is most likely to succeed in practice? This is essentially a simple evaluation of these ideas. After the evaluation, not only will you have selected the initial hypothesis, but you'll also have ranked them based on their merits. If the first hypothesis is proven not to be the best choice, you can immediately switch to the next best idea and re-enter the selection process. With the initial hypothesis in place, you can now proceed to present your core recommendations. The purpose of the hypothesis is to address the problem, while the core recommendations aim to make the other party accept your ideas. To gain approval for your recommendations, you must make your communication recipients care about them. And how do you achieve that? The key is 2 words: self-interest. When your recommendations align closely with your audience's self-interest, they are more willing to listen and adopt your suggestions. So, when delivering core recommendations, don't just state what we should do, which is essentially your earlier hypothesis, but also explain why we should do it. This is the point of self-interest. A good core recommendation boils down to 2 elements: an easily understandable hypothesis and a valuable point of interest for stakeholders. You need to make it clear to your communication recipients what we should do, and avoid using vague phrases like fully leverage efforts to enhance. While these phrases may be technically correct, they are not very effective. If you say, we should use the information system to test a new marketing approach, everyone will understand your intention clearly. This is much more effective than fully utilizing the system. Your recommendations stand a better chance of gaining agreement when they are understood. So, how do you set trigger points? The method is to tailor your statements to your target audience. For example, if your chosen hypothesis is that we should enter the European market and you're sitting across from the vice president of sales, you should know that sales revenue is their primary concern. So, you can say, we should enter the European market because it can generate 80 million yuan in sales revenue. If the person across from you is the marketing director, then your trigger point should shift accordingly. The marketing director is concerned about market share, so you should say, we should enter the European market to capture 40% of the European market share. Similarly, when facing the chief HR officer, you should say something like, we should enter the European market, which will allow us to build a diverse talent pool with both quantity and variety. You'll notice that even though the hypothesis remains the same each time, the trigger points change based on the person you're trying to convince. Sometimes, you may need to persuade not just one person, but a group of individuals with differing interests. What do you do in such a situation? In this case, it requires you to identify priorities and take control of the conversation. First, you need to assess who the decision maker is and who the participants are. Then, you should direct your core recommendation toward the decision maker because they have the most significant impact on the outcome. Once you've identified the decision maker, you should choose the trigger point that best aligns with their interests from among the many trigger points available. For example, if the manager with the most authority is primarily concerned with financial matters, while the other supervisors are concerned with marketing issues, you should start by addressing the financial trigger point and briefly mention the marketing impact at the end. Alright, now that you've completed the first step of proposing recommendations, the next step is to establish the structure. Creating the structure involves organizing ideas and information into logical groups, with the aim of guiding your communication recipients to reach your conclusions. This is the most challenging and critical step in the structured thinking process. In this step, you not only classify ideas but also establish connections between them. Typically, you will use 2 fundamental structures, the hierarchical structure and the hunting structure. The choice of structure depends on the specific situation. However, regardless of which structure you choose, your core recommendation should always be at the top of the structure because everything below it is built based on it. Let's first discuss the hierarchical structure. The hierarchical structure generally consists of 3 levels. The top level is your core recommendation. The middle level points out the changes that have occurred in the current situation. These changes could be events that bring opportunities or challenges, which will directly lead to your recommendation. The bottom level provides background information on the problem, aiming to ensure that everyone has a certain level of understanding. Please note that when thinking, you construct from the top down, meaning the recommendation, situation, and background. However, when narrating, you need to reverse this order and tell the story from the bottom up, background first, then the situation, and finally the recommendation. This is similar to telling a story, starting with how life used to be calm, until one day, something dangerous happened, and finally, how they were rescued. This storytelling structure is the easiest for people to understand and accept. So when do you use the hierarchical structure? The first scenario is when your communication recipients lack background knowledge. If the other party is not familiar with your topic, it's challenging for them to understand the context in which your core recommendation is situated, and thus, difficult to support it. In the bottom layer of the hierarchical structure, you need to introduce the team's working model and how the current team members have been working hard to meet the company's needs. Additionally, explain the impact of teamwork on the company's performance. With this information as a foundation, the new boss can understand the team's work and its significance. They won't perceive it as merely complaining about workload, and your recommendation is more likely to be accepted. The second scenario is when your communication recipients resist your recommendation. Sometimes, before you even start speaking, the other party shows signs of resistance and discontent. This could be because you are competing for the same resource, your recommendation carries high risk, or simply because they don't like you. Regardless of the reason for their resistance, your task is to overcome this obstacle and get your proposal approved. In the section of situational changes in the hierarchical structure, you need to provide ample reasons for the action, help the audience set aside their preconceptions, recognize the necessity of the action, and follow your thought process in considering the issue. For example, if the recent trend is that the Food and Drug Administration is conducting large-scale reviews of product labels, and several products similar to yours have been ordered to make corrections, you might propose that the company should promptly change the product labels. The stakeholder happens to be the packaging manager responsible for label application. It's clear that he would prefer to maintain the status quo because changing labels would incur overtime budget overruns and employee dissatisfaction. Your statement should make the packaging manager realize that although changing labels has a cost, not taking action now will only make the situation worse in the future. Therefore, in the layer of situational changes in the hierarchical structure, you need to clearly explain the negative consequences of not changing labels. For example, when a certain product is forced to make corrections, it not only needs to recall and destroy all products currently on the market but also replace them with labels that comply with regulations. Additionally, once the correction is made, a significant market share will be given away. By designing the situational changes layer in the hierarchical structure, you can transform opponents from being unwilling to take action to willing to support your core recommendation. Let's talk about the hunting structure. The hunting structure is like a stool, with the core recommendation as the top board. The main points are like the legs of the stool, firmly supporting the seat. To establish this structure, you first need to identify the main points within the core recommendation and create a separate list for each point. Then, fill in each list with specific content. When should you choose the hunting structure? When stakeholders already have some understanding of the topic and don't require extensive background information but are looking for a quick and direct understanding of the recommendation. In such cases, the hunting structure is most suitable. During narration, you can follow the logical progression from problem to solution directly. In the first sentence, you can get straight to the point by presenting the core recommendation, followed by listing the supporting arguments one by one. Let's illustrate this with an example. Suppose you are the marketing director of a magazine company, and you've formulated a core recommendation for better selling the Trendy Campus magazine. We should position Trendy Campus and its marketing activities toward teenagers and young parents. This will result in $3 million in sales, $1 million in profit, and a 15% profit margin increase. Upon closer analysis of your core recommendation, you can identify 3 main components: product marketing, market positioning, and sales revenue. You can then create 3 columns under the core recommendation to break down each component. Next, you need to turn the key points in each column into complete sentences. For example, one of the points under market positioning might be, we should focus our marketing and sales efforts on two primary market segments. Once you've established the main points, you can further break down each point into subpoints. For example, under the two primary market segments, you can specify teenagers and young parents. A good structure guides your narrative and points you in the right direction for analysis. Once the structure is established, your plan is halfway done. Now, let's move on to the third step, analyze and adjust. Structured thinking is based on assumptions, and your analysis in this step will directly prove or disprove your assumptions. Therefore, thorough analysis is crucial in this step. Your analysis must meet two criteria: it must be necessary and sufficient. Necessary means that your analysis should focus on essential factual material. For instance, if you need to demonstrate that young professionals are the target users of your app, and you've conducted a survey with a large sample of users, then in this step, you should carefully analyze the data concerning this demographic, including the size of the group, their spending power, and usage duration. If you spend a significant amount of time analyzing data for other user groups or delve into why they don't like your product, it's considered unnecessary analysis. If an analysis does not support your argument, you should not waste energy on it. Your analysis not only needs to be necessary but also sufficient. Only sufficient evidence can convince others that your idea is correct. If your analysis is based on the feedback of only 15 people, even if they all express their liking for your product, it won't carry much weight. Only when supported by a market survey involving 15,000 consumers can your analysis be considered sufficient and convincing. If your analysis can prove each point and support your core recommendation, that's great, and your plan can proceed smoothly. If the analysis challenges your points, there's no need to panic. Discovering problems in advance helps you avoid the awkward situation of being questioned and opposed on the spot. You can modify or replace the challenged points, adjust your structure, and then conduct a new analysis. If several points are problematic at the same time, pause and examine your existing data and information. It might have already undermined your core recommendation. Up until now, you may have been working independently at your desk or with your small team without sharing your ideas with others. As they say, those who are directly involved can easily become confused. Focusing on a problem for too long can narrow your thinking, and when you know the problem too well, it can be challenging to imagine how others will receive it. After you have a preliminary plan, consider discussing it with colleagues from other departments or even your boss. They might offer valuable advice or insights that can refine your ideas. During this step, it's perfectly normal to make adjustments to your original plan. No one can achieve perfection in a single attempt. So, don't lose confidence just because you've identified issues. Remember that every preceding step has helped you gain a clearer understanding of the problem, delve deeper into the interests and needs of others, and accumulate a wealth of information and analytical results. In the structured thinking process, each step is a step closer to the correct answer. After analysis and adjustment, both the content and structure are now complete. Next, we move on to the final step, integration and presentation. There are many ways to present your plan. You can briefly explain your ideas in a short voice message lasting a few seconds or send an email with the complete plan to many people. However, in most companies, the most commonly used method is a report. A report is ideal for analyzing complex data, concepts, or graphics, as it can present a vast amount of information in an easily digestible format. A well-structured report typically consists of 5 main sections: title page, executive summary, analysis and argumentation, risk and opportunity list, and a clear action plan. Let's start with how to write the title. If you want to leave a good first impression, avoid generic titles like "Proposal for Entering the European Market." Such titles lack appeal. After using structured thinking, you can easily modify your core idea to create an engaging title. For example, you can change it to "Seizing an €80 million sales opportunity by expanding into the European market." Now, let's talk about how to write the executive summary. The executive summary is a concise representation of your entire plan on a single slide. The good news is that structured thinking has already provided you with the content for your executive summary, which is your structure. If you've used a hunting structure, your executive summary starts with the core recommendation, followed by the information from each column. If you've used a layer structure, your executive summary begins with the background introduction, followed by the changes in form and concludes with the core recommendation. We won't dwell on the analysis and argumentation section, as you can simply arrange your points and corresponding arguments in the order of your executive summary. After presenting the arguments, it's a good idea to dedicate a slide to the risks and opportunities of your plan. When discussing risks, explain their sources, potential impacts if they occur, and your plans for mitigating them. When addressing opportunities, define what the opportunities are, their value, and how you intend to capitalize on them. Don't consider this section as redundant, it's actually a way to proactively address potential concerns, ward off opposition, and demonstrate thorough preparation to your audience. Finally, you should outline the action plan for the future. You need to make it clear what will happen once your proposal is approved. You don't need to provide a detailed project schedule, instead, list 3 to 10 key milestones, briefly describe the actions, indicate the planned timeframe, and specify the required resources. This makes it easier to seek support when you need it. When you integrate these steps, you'll find that structured thinking is not only an incredibly efficient work method but also a mindset. It helps you focus your efforts in the right places, keeps your audience at the center of your communication, deters the notion of achieving everything at once, and allows for continuous improvement through iterations. So, there you have it. This book on minimalist thinking has been summarized for you. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom with practice to achieve our financial goals and create a better future. Thank you, and goodbye.